Okay, good afternoon, students, and welcome to our third webinar in our professional development series. My name's Alyssa, and obviously I'm joined with the lovely Alison. So, Alison, give us a bit of a shout out there to our students.
Hi everyone, how are you all?
Alison and I will be taking you through this afternoon the last two components of the professional development learning activities. So the very, very first week we looked at the whole concept of SMART goals. Last week we looked at the concept of work priorities and learning. And this week we go into the final two elements of professional development, which are 360-degree feedback and professional growth. Now, for all of you who may have missed joining our sessions live, I have actually uploaded all of those sessions now into the portal. So if Alison, if you just want to click on professional development, the little icon, you'll see that down the bottom there, you have access to those webinars, which are there. Yep. So you should be able to notice that there is now a playlist. So if you click on the playlist, it'll obviously take you through the option of seeing the first session and then also the second session. And by the end of today, you'll have your third session up and running, which you guys obviously can access whenever is convenient for you. If you're going through the webinar and there's a couple of questions that you might have for Alison or myself or even Adam when he returns next week, just shoot us through a message using the actual message or email my trainer option, and yeah, we'll get that and we'll endeavour to respond to you as soon as we can. Yeah, just as easy as clicking on that and you just get to say, "Hi Alyssa, I have absolutely no idea how to answer learning activity number 4. Can you help me?" That'll pop into our inbox and we'll get that instantaneously. So don't be afraid to ask any questions to any of us. We're obviously here to assist you and make your journey a little bit easier and hopefully more fun. So yeah, please feel free to reach out if you need to. Alison, let's do a little bit of a recap of the last couple of weeks. So that very, very first week, we looked at the whole concept of SMART goals. And you mentioned the whole concept and the whole idea of just obviously it being really the center of a lot of businesses and the center of a lot of functions within organizations, and having that you know, if you can, having the opportunity to print that whole visual kind of concept of SMART, which was specific, measurable, attainable or achievable, realistic, and timely as well. I think somewhere amongst all of the resources is that really nice picture, which we refer to a lot, not only in this unit, but obviously throughout the units as well. I think it's on the next page. There it is. Perfect. Lovely.
I have a habit of flicking through all the pages because it reminds me in which order everything is, because I'm always going back just to check some of those little acronyms and the charts and things that they do have on there. So I happily flick around page to page quite frequently. I'm a bit like that.
Oh, I'm definitely the same. I sometimes work very illogically, like I'll go one concept 4 slides back, and but that is, as we've talked about before, that's a really great little visual kind of key there. So you know, just making sure that you know, you remember the whole kind of concept of having those really SMART based goals. So that's what we really talked about on that very first week. Last week we talked about work priorities, and we talked about learning, didn't we, Alison?
We did learning and planning as well. We sort of went through this one, that planning your workload, how important and urgent different tasks might be as well. So, and I found myself thinking about that on the weekend. I had quite a few things that were all piling up, and I had to stop myself at one point and just think, okay, now what's the most important, what's urgent, and put the not important things to the side, and they got done at the end.
Oh, that's an excellent example. That's a good practical application of of that particular little tool there. I think sometimes it's hard, isn't it, to like go, ooh, if you start categorizing your tasks, it really does help with the whole kind of the planning process. It makes you far more efficient. We also talked about technology last week as well in terms of that efficiency in that planning process. Um,
We did. We came up, and I've actually uploaded a couple of different apps that I'm playing around with on my phone this week after we had that conversation last week. So I'll give some feedback shortly on those ones. I've done a little bit of playing around with them. So once I've worked out after a week or two what works really well, I'll share the information.
Oh, that's exciting. I mean, I think it's yeah, that would be great. There's so many different apps out there, and sometimes you don't know, like just because something sounds good, doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right kind of application for you. But if you've obviously
Mm,
got great apps that you use, I think that kind of word of mouth is really works really, really well. So that would be awesome.
absolutely.
Now we talked about that. We also talked about learning. So if you guys out there remember, there were different types of learners and different types of learning styles. So when you're looking at things like professional development, understanding your learning style, whether or not you're an auditory, you're a kinesthetic, or you're a visual learner, really does help to determine or help you determine what the best professional development activities for you would be. So last week's activities, we had you do the VAC test to determine, where you sat and how you could kind of utilise that learning style. And I think that's what we talked about last week. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, this week we go into our last two topics. And our first topic is, as you've already mentioned, the lovely feedback and the importance of feedback. And then we go into the importance of actual professional development. So things like networking opportunities, how beneficial it can be for you, some of the learning opportunities out there, and how you're kind of bringing those tools into play to help develop yourself and bring yourself forward in terms of your skill sets and your knowledge. So, oh, you've got it up and running. The power of feedback. What are your thoughts on feedback, Alison? I mean, what do you feel is feedback? I mean, do you think it's an important part of an organisation, a really important part of development?
It's an integral part, and it really doesn't matter what industry or size of an organisation or anything. If you're not actually getting feedback, positive or negative, you just going to stay static, I think, to be able to move forward in any sort of business and learn more about yourself as an individual, but also as a company. You need to get that feedback all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, do you think it's okay for students if you're in a position where you are in a workplace and sometimes, the traditional formal feedback processes might not be as fluid through the organisation? Do you think it's okay for students or for, if you're a member of an organisation to ask for feedback? Do you think managers would mind?
A really good manager should love the fact that a staff member is asking for feedback. Again, it's about their personal and professional development that you seek feedback for. So I think a really good manager, a really good business would be more than happy to give that. You might find that there'll be times where perhaps they're particularly busy or quite stressed at the time. So just ask them if you can, schedule in a time to do a bit of feedback with them, have a session. Might be something that they can bring up generally in staff meetings and things like that, or if they feel that there's a lot more to it and it's more in depth, they can actually organise a one-on-one meeting with you, and that could be, a performance appraisal style or just one-on-one to discuss things with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there is definitely a validity now, and there's definite definition between, your informal processes of feedback and your formalized processes of feedback within your organizations. An interesting trend that I'm finding in a lot of organizations is the move away from the formal feedback processes and really encouraging management to be a little bit more proactive and informal with their feedback. So, getting them to really deliver feedback for all team members on a daily basis, to really kind of, take away the stigma of what a performance appraisal is, as in only opportunity to give feedback, but kind of, making that feedback process a very daily kind of ritual almost, and always giving people feedback, which I think is a very interesting process.
And I think it can be, again, whether it's positive or negative feedback, it can be a little less confronting, actually, if you're given little chunks of it along the way, rather than a whole lot of information in one hit. So it's definitely got merit.
I definitely, and it's just a little bit more comforting. I think, it doesn't seem as intimidating if sometimes, you're in a performance appraisal situation, which I still think are incredibly important part of processes, but it does take away the stress of being able to, receive and be able to give that feedback. It becomes more of a conversational type of situation rather than, a little bit more structure behind it. And I think people embrace that a little bit more, and
I think they do as well.
yeah. And I guess it also depends on the type of feedback that people give. I mean, we talk about things like positive feedback. We talk about things like negative, constructive feedback. Um, what's your thought processes on the positive, constructive, negative feedback? I mean, where do you see yourself in terms of delivering feedback? What would you like, or how do you deliver your feedback, Alison?
Pretty much always start with a positive, even if you've got something that's a real issue and you know that it is predominantly negative that you've got to deliver. You need to sort of do it in a constructive way and make sure that, sort of starting with some sort of a positive if you can, to, sort of lead into it and ensure that it is very much constructive. Never making it, when you're talking business-wise, never making it a personal attack on someone, but being very constructive about actual things that have taken place, actions that have been done. And, if it does happen to be something that's particularly negative, how can you actually then start giving straight away some positive suggestions? So again, it puts that positive spin towards it.
Yeah. I mean, I find that particularly adults, if you do start off with a negative piece of feedback, and I have seen it many times before, as soon as you start off with that negative, you've lost the connection with the team member. Like, they've put up boundaries and they've put up barriers already, and they can't see past that negative comment that you've started off with. So I agree with you. I mean, you remember the old feedback sandwich? Remember the old feedback sandwich? Have you
Yes.
that? Yeah. And you start off with positive, and then you pop the negative in there, and then you finish off with that positive, because people need to hear the positives, and then they'll see the negatives, but they won't see them such as negatives as such. So yeah, I think it's an interesting. I think sometimes people are quite reactive in how they give feedback. So we hear a lot, "Oh, you did that incorrectly," or "You shouldn't have done that," and people don't take very well to those types of pieces of feedback. If it's constructive, it works much more effectively.
Definitely. They need to be able to take something from it. So instead of just everything I need to change, what am I doing right? And then if I do these other things that I've been doing wrong, right as well, that will improve everything.
Yeah, and I mean, I also think as well, from an employee perspective, managers, hopefully will give you feedback in terms of professional development and help you, build on your strengths. And you as an employee also should have the opportunity to be able to provide feedback, to your organisation about areas where perhaps they need to consider development too. And quite often as employees, you might come along and you might have, a series of issues that you feel need to be addressed, And what's really nice is to, if you are giving feedback to your organisation, is not to come along with just the issues, but just to also offer us some actions that can help bridge those areas for development as well. So, it becomes like a mutual kind of agreement in terms of feedback from manager to employee needs to be positive as well as positive, but more positive. But also, you guys giving your managers feedback too. So coming, I guess, with solutions rather than just problems sometimes.
Think of it as brainstorming.
I
Got to
love.
take on all those different ideas and thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as a side note as well, have you ever used a 360-degree type of feedback process in any of your organisations previously?
I have actually. An organisation that I worked for several years ago, they used to do it for all the regional managers. So each of us in a regional manager position would work closely with the other regions. We'd have regular teleconferences once every week. Every 2 months we'd all get together in the same room for 2 days and do workshops and all that sort of thing. And a few of us within the same area would quite frequently email each other for ideas and suggestions and talk on the phone every few days. So we had even though we weren't physically working in the same location, we had a good relationship. So the 360 situation that we had there was, say, for myself as regional manager, the regional manager from the office 2 hours south of me that I worked quite closely with would do 360 feedback on me, as well as somebody from head office or one of my own staff within the branch that I worked at. So it sort of gave that 360 feedback from different levels as well. So quite often you'll find that it's used across, say, just management. So it might just be all the regional managers doing it for each other. But I found this one was quite good because it actually had different levels within the organisation. So they gave different types of feedback, which was really good.
Yeah, that sounds. I've actually never had the opportunity to work in an organisation that has the 360-degree process. So it obviously seems to be quite effective. Was that a large organisation or a smaller organisation?
Fairly large organisation actually, based across 3 states in Australia, so fairly widespread. Um, First time I had to do it, very confronting actually.
Yeah.
Knowing that somebody that I didn't work with every day face to face
Mm.
was able to give very valid and constructive feedback about me, as well as my own staff within the office. And it was also a little bit confronting actually when I had to do it for somebody else also. So the first time it can be, yeah, quite a different approach, and it can be uncomfortable. But again, so long as you make sure when you're actually doing it for somebody else, giving the feedback on another person, that it's constructive.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you're not providing feedback on your personal interpretation of that individual, but that there's actual elements, actions, incidences, examples of certain activities that they've done to kind of warrant that type of feedback.
That's right, how they're filling their role, how they're actually doing their duties, how they're communicating with everybody else, what sort of customer service levels do they appear to be, giving to the general public, all of those sorts of things. So very constructive types of information is what it's got to be focused on, not, oh, I don't like the way they dress, or,
Yeah.
it's nothing about that unless, and how ours worked was we had specific questions, and it was like, a, an area where you could put, up to 3 or 4 paragraphs if you wanted to, describing how you felt they worked with their leadership skills, or, sort of what do you feel their major strengths are, and things like that. So, again, very much role based,
Yeah.
not personal
Yeah, which
based.
yeah, which is great, and seems to be a very effective tool because was that done on a yearly basis, or was it done a little bit more frequently or less frequently?
Once a year, we would have our performance appraisals with the CEO every 6 months, and the 360-degree feedback sessions would happen once a year.
Wow, so you had performance appraisals and you had your 360s as well.
Yes.
Wow, wow. And so from that feedback process, so from your performance appraisal feedback that you've got and the 360-degree feedback that you also receive, then do you put in place almost like an action plan to be able to help you bridge any areas which have been identified as concerns?
Absolutely, and you could come up then with just small areas that you need to be trained in, or it quite often even came up with suggestions of topics that needed to come up in the next regional manager's staff meeting or the workshops. As I said, every few months we'd get together in the same location and go through some workshops. So if everybody had had their 360 feedback sessions in the month prior, the CEO and human resources would go through all of that and then go, okay, you know what we really need to do a massive session on in our workshops is marketing and networking. That's somewhere where everybody seems to be struggling a little bit at the moment. So let's get all our regional managers on the same page and working strongly in that area. So it gave the organisation as well as us personally some fantastic information to take forward.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a very, very strong performance management structure in place. I mean, it seems that you had opportunities for there were a lot of feedback opportunities in there, and there was a lot of focus on the development of the team.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, the actual organisation was involved in recruitment as well. So
Yep.
obviously, we needed to be leaders in how to look after your staff
Mm.
because of the industry that we were in.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it seems it. I know a lot of organisations. I mean, working in hospitality for such a long period of time, hospitality is a very operationally focused industry. So having performance management systems and structures like you've just mentioned can be really difficult because from an operational purpose focus, the operation had always come first. So if and it's a business that's open 365 days a year, but at the same time, you've still got to focus on the development, the professional development of your team members constantly. And we had a structure in place. So we had a performance management structure in place where we would do things like performance reviews. But I think where we missed was the actions that followed those performance reviews. So we had given, we have a great system where we gather that feedback and we do the performance appraisals. But we don't action them and we don't use the information that we've received, or we didn't use the information that we received as effectively as I know some other businesses could, and really go and develop those real solid, personal performance plans, and look at that, whole process of succession planning, and really understanding who your team members are, where they're at, and what they need, and as an organisation, what we could give to them.
That's right. And it can be hard, isn't it, when you've got such a fast-paced industry that is so governed by what else is happening out there in the community and what all the competitors are doing and that sort of thing. And, depending on your staff turnover, because obviously that sort of industry, hospitality, you do have people that come and go a lot more frequently as well. So that can make it really tricky.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think you struggle with, kind of with the casual nature of a business as well. I mean, it can work really effectively in those performance management systems. Work really effectively if you've got probably like a majority of full timers or salaried team members. With the casual nature of some businesses, it's hard to be able to understand, where there are perhaps development requirements. I still think that the opportunity should be there for those team members anyway. So
Yeah.
I'm quite envious of your experience when it comes to that 360 and also the performance appraisals, but also having those really dynamic workshops as well to really kind of look at what's needed and implement what's needed. I think that's a really nice that sounds like a really nice system in place.
And it was a way of ensuring that, even though all the managers were, individual people, we always had the organisation's goals and everything that we were all striving for and all trying to, push forward in the same ways. So, for a large organisation, it worked really well.
Oh, absolutely. And if we go back to, things like SMART goals and business objectives, I mean, having a very, your team members are really the essence of success and they drive to be able to achieve those business objectives. And if you haven't got the systems in place to be able to offer them the development that they need, then it's very difficult for you to set business objectives if you haven't got the resources that can help you achieve those business objectives. So it can be a very trickle-on effect. I mean, there's nothing better than nothing better and than an organisation that has incredibly talented, skilled resources or humans that work for them or team members, because that's where that success comes from. Their capabilities and their qualities and their skill set.
That's right, and knowing how to, embrace those positives and work on the negatives.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, just as a curious, do you think people are sometimes afraid of getting feedback or being able to give feedback?
I think it's something that you've got to learn to be, I think, a little bit more proactive and, have some faith in yourself. There's a lot of people I've worked with in the past that wouldn't dare ask, how am I performing, or, did you watch me go through my day of sales training? How do you think I performed? Anything like that. Because, they don't not quite confident enough in themselves to know what the feedback's going to be, so would rather avoid it. But it's definitely something that it's the same as like networking, which we'll talk about a little bit later. It's something that is, a skill that people can learn, and, hopefully we'll get some positives out of it that will give them the confidence to take that and go forward and make that a new habit.
Yeah, absolutely. And an organisation where there's a culture of, giving feedback and receiving feedback, but the culture also of seeing that feedback being implemented, I think that creates
Yes.
and takes away that fear of kind of saying something, because sometimes people think that if I say something, my words will be lost or my ideas won't be taken seriously, or it can be very challenging to be able to do that. But I think an organisation that kind of sees that process through, I think that's a very, very powerful organisation and has a definite strong culture in place. It just in place in general. So it's a great thing.
And it always helps the teamwork, doesn't it? Sort of
Oh,
if there's open communication.
absolutely. It's absolutely an effective tool. But you also mentioned networking. So you had mentioned that networking is kind of similar to, or networking can have its challenges that are very similar to feedback. Um, what are your thoughts on networking? I think networking is a very, very big thing right now in terms of organisations and business. So there's a lot of encouragement to really network and get out there and kind of make yourself visible in industry and organisations.
That's right. And there's so many reasons for doing it and doing it effective as well. It can allow you to build your business, whether that mean, getting out there and finding new customers or clients. Getting your name and your face out there can lead to referrals, but also it can help you to get to know your competitors, which is a huge advantage in business these days. If you know what everybody else is doing in your local community and in similar businesses to yours, that can help you get a leg up in business. So there's so many positives to actually doing it, but yes, it's a matter of again having a bit of confidence to be able to do it. I remember the first time I was asked to actually go to a function where it was all of my competitors in town. This is back when I worked in the travel industry. I was asked to actually go to a dinner. So I was going to be sitting down at a table with staff from all of the competitors in town and
Oh,
actually learning about a particular product.
yeah.
I was 18, I think, at the time, and I just thought, oh, you're kidding. You want me to actually go and, sit with all these people that, we try and get sales against each and every day.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
But, over the years, I got more and more confident in doing it and became great friends with all of these other people. But again, it gave me a great idea lots of great ideas on where everybody else's strengths and weaknesses were by getting to know the people that work for those organisations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's better the devil. Well, it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't. Like I think,
Mm,
knowing what your competitors are doing from a business standpoint is very, very powerful, and kind of also having that trust element there as well. I mean, it's always nice to be able to know what's happening, and it's always nice to kind of um, get into a situation such as networking where you kind of are almost a part of something. I think for me, I've always, I have to tell you, I've always been very terrified at networking. I mean, we used to have to go to industry functions, being in hotels, and it's extremely terrifying and scary to be able to
mm,
walk up to people and, as you said, have the confidence to, stand in a room and represent an organization that you work for and represent a series of ideas and almost, introduce yourself to people that you really have no idea who are, but you might know them by name. And I think it can be a really empowering step that very, very first time that you kind of go to a function or you connect with somebody, because I think it does really empower you and it gives you a little bit of a taste. And it's nice to know that you have confidence in yourself in that situation sometimes.
absolutely. And it's something where people can even just try it on a social level
Yeah,
first to actually see how comfortable you are in, you might go to the pub on a Friday night and, meet someone new. Start telling them about yourself professionally and where you work and find out about more about, who they work for. It's a similar sort of thing. So if that's going to give you some self-confidence and some ease in being able to comfortably do that in a professional setting, that's a really good way to do it. And I think sort of even, in sporting groups and things like that, it's amazing how many people you can get to know, through your social contacts
yeah,
and think of that as networking.
yeah, absolutely. Um, you never know who you're talking to. That's my belief system. Whenever you're having a coffee with somebody, or whenever you've met somebody, or whenever you've shaken somebody's hand and had a conversation about something, you just never, never know who that person is or who that person knows. Um, and I mean, as you said, I definitely encourage you guys out there to, maybe look at that whole concept of the social networking. Tools like LinkedIn as well, the actual social component of networking has kind of grown quite dramatically from a technology point of view as well. So now you have that social media element when it comes to networking, which gives you a lot more, probably a greater scope in terms of who you can connect with, which can be quite advantageous for you. And if are a little bit worried about that kind of face-to-face type of networking, LinkedIn can also be quite a good opportunity just to kind of ease yourself into that process. But I mean, a great tool just to kind of kind of get you out there. And I know a lot of businesses, and there's a lot of talk out there that the visibility of people in organisations is becoming really, really important. So it's almost not what you know; it's almost like who you know. And it's an interesting kind of discussion, and a lot of people that I know that are working in different industries have been encouraged by their CEOs to really just network, 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 network. Get out there, see what other organisations are doing. Offer information about what we're doing. We're going to get information about them. It's going to make us stronger. It's going to make us better, and it's also empowering the individual as well, to build relationships. And the strength of building relationships is essential in terms of your own personal professional development. It's so I had
Definitely.
a group of individuals last week, and I was doing some training, and very, very experienced in the industry that they currently work in. And there was 11 of them in the classroom, and each of them had probably about 20 years of management experience in their industry, and probably about 90% of them, they felt that networking was one of their biggest areas for improvement. They just felt incredibly overwhelmed by the process of actual networking. It's very fascinating. They've got so much confidence and so much knowledge in what they do, yet just from that kind of self, like not self motivation, but that kind of self part of them was what always stopped them from actually networking. So it's very interesting. It's a very powerful tool, I think.
Absolutely, and it is something that can seem quite terrifying until you've dabbled in it a little bit, if you like.
Once you get a taste, and then they start offering you free wine, it's all good.
One thing to be mindful of with networking is confidentiality. That's one thing that I find some people can be a little bit unsure of. Obviously, you don't want to sort of walk into a networking event and start, telling them what your sales figures have been, or, sort of what your newest accomplishments have been, and giving away too much information. I've been to situations like that where people almost seem to be bragging and spruiking about information, which makes them look a little bit pompous and a little bit into themselves a bit too much, so it doesn't come across well. But then also, if they happen to be just really telling stories or giving away confidential information about the organisation, that doesn't come off well either. So confidentiality is sometimes having a bit of a lead-in spiel can be quite good. Practice, what do they call it? The elevator speech. If you were in an elevator from, the first to the fifth floor with someone and had to introduce yourself and tell them who you are and what you do, have your little elevator speech practice. So you've got your general lead-in that, can lead into a conversation with someone.
And when I went, to kind of ease my pain a little bit when it came to this type of stuff, is that if there was somebody that I really was keen to meet in terms of a potential network, I would get them in a one-on-one space. So I might have invited them into the hotel for a coffee, or I might have, you know what I mean? So I kind of took it out of the actual, I took it out of the environment that there were lots of people there. So I kind of brought it into a safe environment so I could have a bit more of a one-on-one opportunity where I felt I was a little bit stronger than rather in group environments.
And most people are like that. Some people might be the opposite. So again, learning what is going to put you most at ease.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right, Alison. Well, how about we have a look at the last couple of learning activities, because I think the learning activities are really around about the feedback that we talked about before, and networking as well. So let's open up that's it, learning activity 4, that wonderful thing that's called 360-degree feedback. And as we have mentioned previously, so when you guys are answering these questions, you can either directly add it into the online text box, or you can download your template where we've put all the questions already in there for you. And you just really have to just answer the questions on the actual template, and then you just have to upload it in. So nice and easy. Just make sure that if you're going to use the template, that you actually make sure you upload the answers into that template before you send it off. So make sure there's answers in there. Okay. All right. So learning activity number 4, which is 360-degree feedback, has 5 questions. Okay. That very first question says, what is the frequency of feedback you currently receive, and how can you improve the frequency and quality of the feedback you get, and how could you use it to improve yourself? From my perspective here, Alison, I'm seeing probably about 3 questions. So I'm seeing a bit of a self-analysis on how frequently do you currently receive your feedback? What strategies can you use to improve the feedback and the quality of the feedback you get? And then how could you actually use that feedback to improve yourself?
Yeah, so this is going to be another one of those where we'll get to know a little bit more about you and your situation. So, we can see what your current level of experience is in this. Are you with an organisation at the moment who are fantastic with, feedback all the time, or is it something that you have to go seeking, are you confident enough to seek that feedback? And, when you do get some feedback, positive or negative, how do you actually use it to improve yourself? So what experiences have you got?
Now, if you're not working at the moment, obviously using this course, because Alison and myself, we every time you submit a learning activity to us or an assessment to us, we obviously give you feedback. So you can draw on this course as an example to be able to even answer this question if perhaps you don't you're not currently in a work environment. So don't forget to use this course, because this is a great example, I think, of actual feedback, that you'll receive a lot of feedback from us.
Yes, there'll always be something at the end of just about everything.
Exactly right. There's feedback.
We love sharing our ideas with you.
Do. Now let's have a look at question 2, which says, if you don't meet a desired job standard, what could you do to improve your skills or knowledge? Okay, so essentially my interpretation of this question and what I would be looking at would be, if you were in a workplace scenario and there was a particular element of your job that perhaps you didn't meet, okay, or perhaps there was a little gap there, what could you do to improve your skills or knowledge? What could you do? Is it possible that you could ask for some feedback on your performance? If so, what could you do with that feedback to be able to improve your understanding of that particular standard? There are lots of little opportunities out there, and we talked a couple about last week. We talked about learning, and coaching and mentoring and whatnot. So if you don't meet that job standard, what could you do to be able to improve and to be able to bridge that gap?
So it might be just, is there specific feedback you need to seek that can actually help you to meet the standard that you feel that you're not quite up to the level of?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Now, question 2 then goes on, question 3 kind of follows on from question 2 and just says, using your current job description, what are the job standards required of you and how do you measure yourself against these standards? Okay. So, if you have access to your job description, what are some of the elements in your job description? So, what are some of the requirements of you in your role? I wouldn't be looking at you including your whole job description here, but I would probably be looking at maybe 5 to 6 valid requirements of your job description. I mean, Alison, do you think that's just enough for that question? 5 or 6 points?
Yes, I think it would be. And, sort of if it's something like, you need to provide high level of customer service, something like that. So that might be the job standard required of you. So how do you actually measure yourself against that? So do you have do you ask your customers for feedback? Does the organisation have feedback forms that come back through that you get to have a look at when they're analysed and come back through? So actually be specific about what's required of you, and then how you get the feedback.
Yeah, and also, do you set yourself SMART goals in the organisation that help you measure whether or not you can achieve those standards as well? That could be another measurement. You've set yourself a goal with regards to your job description or your requirement in your workplace, and that's how you measure yourself, because, did I achieve that goal? Did I achieve what I needed to achieve? And that will then help you measure that success as well. Always comes back to SMART goals. Now, what are your suggestions, Alison, if our students are not currently in the workplace? Would you be keen for them to perhaps look at standards that might be required from this experience of online learning? Could we get them to identify 3 standards required from this perspective?
They definitely could. There's probably a few different things that they could use for this, obviously depending on who they are and what some of the biggest parts of their own personal life are. Sort of from my perspective, I do a lot of volunteer work for a local sporting club. So if I wasn't actually in employment at the moment, that I could look at, it's not a paid position, but I have a lot of duties within that particular job, volunteer job, if you like. So I could actually go through, you know, what would be required of me from that, and then, you know, how do I see if I'm being successful? Am I achieving the goals that have been set for me to achieve in that particular volunteer job?
Right. So kind of it can be whatever they feel has some kind of standard or some kind of requirement, whether it be study or whether it be some kind of personal element, or as you mentioned, a volunteer process, a part of a community, certain requirements they might have from that perspective. Yeah. Okay.
I think it could.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. Just and also just I've had a couple of students that have answered this question and they have said, just, you know, I don't actually have a job, so I can't answer it. So whenever you get to a question where it specifically does say something about a job description and you're not employed, you still do need to have some kind of answer to that particular question. I think it's important to note that you know, there are other ways to kind of approach the question, just as Alison has suggested when it comes to these particular questions. So just make sure you really, you know, even though you aren't employed, just think outside the box a little bit and look at what you do, either, you know, when you get home or any kind of volunteer work that you do or study that you do. I think it can definitely all relate.
Absolutely. I mean, it might even be, you know, sort of if you've been looking for work for quite some time, you know, what you need to do to actually try and achieve full-time employment, part-time work, casual, whatever it might be. You might have a set of standards that you expect yourself to achieve, you know, applying for a certain number of jobs per week or something like that. You know, so throw some ideas around there. And yeah, if we need further information from you, that's where we give the feedback.
That's exactly right. Now let's have a quick look at question 4. A nice self-reflective question here. So when was the last time you formally asked for feedback from the people around you and how did it go? So again, look, a very individual response to this question. So it's really getting you to kind of think about, well, when was the last time that I actually asked for some feedback? And what was the feedback that I did ask for? How did I go? I mean, it's okay to ask for feedback. And I guess this question is really getting you to think about and let you know that it is okay to ask for feedback. I mean, if you want to know how you're going, it's okay to want to know how you're going, and it's okay to ask somebody how you're going. So again, I very, very individual type of answer that I guess, yeah, hopefully you'll all get right if you hopefully all answer that question.
And hopefully, you know, give us some, and with how did you do, not just I did fine or I did okay. Just, you know, give us a little bit of information on it. So, you know, what were the positives that you were given? Were there any negatives? And how did you take it?
That's exactly right. My coach this morning, he had said to me that when I run, I don't get my hips up, and I don't get so my leg drive is not high enough. So I've got to start moving my hip more. And I said, well, how do I move my hip more? And he said, you've got to, you know, obviously make sure you boost off your other leg so you get a little bit more hip drive. So therefore, then I totally just focused on this hip drive for the next half an hour. And I did really well, and I changed my actual stride. But tomorrow I'll go back and I probably won't. I probably won't even remember that I had the conversation actually. But it was good feedback. It was good feedback. I think it's important to ask for feedback, but also to ask, how can I fix that? What are your suggestions on improving it? I mean, it's one thing to give that feedback, but it's another thing, and it takes an even greater person to say, and I've got some great ideas on how you can help fix that or how you can improve on that as well.
Even if it's something is positive feedback, you know, oh, you're fantastic in sales. Tell them what are the best things that they do in sales so that they know what they, you know, should really focus on continuing and doing that continually that way.
Yeah, absolutely positive. Now, shall we have a look at that last question, Alison? Of what benefit do you think completing a 360-degree feedback survey is for you and the business? Now, I think earlier in the session, you really gave us an excellent overview of the whole 360-degree feedback process, and you really highlighted the benefits that it has for the individual and the business as well.
So yes, this will be interesting actually to see what people's thoughts are, whether they've had experience with it or not, because obviously it's a little bit different for the different sizes and different types of businesses. So if you can give a bit of an example here, so if it's not something that's currently done, think about how you could actually use it within your business, and at what level of staff would you have involved? What sort of questions do you think you would include in the feedback survey? So thinking about the big picture, if you
Yeah.
like, and then because if you do that, then you can bring it back to what benefits it can bring to the company.
Excellent, excellent. I think that's some great feedback. Now, shall we have a look at the learning activity 5, which I think is about professional development. So just up a bit further. Yay. Beautiful. Okay. I quite like these series of questions. There's actually some really nice questions in here, and again, really gives us the opportunity to understand who you are, and where you come from and what your background is. That very first question there for professional growth is: upon reflecting on your professional growth over the past 2 years, what problems have you faced? How did you overcome them? And it says provide examples of what you learned about yourself and your processes at work. I really like this question. I think it's a really nice question. I mean, after you've read through all the material and you've gone through the last 4 learning activities, it's really nice to sit down and say, well, let me think about the last 2 years in terms of my career, in terms of my professional growth. What are some of the problems or what are some of the challenges that I faced, and how did I overcome them? Okay. And as a result of these, and I want you to be really specific, it says provide examples. So we're probably looking for at least, 2 to 3 examples of what that process showed, or what did you learn about yourself during that process. So it can be very, very, very self-reflective. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer here. I think it really is an individual response, and as long as you address each part of the question, bring a bit of yourself into this question.
Another one of those self-reflecting ones that, sort of have you thinking back over, what you have actually experienced and what you took from it.
That's exactly right. I think that's the thing, isn't it? That we can have challenges, and we can have challenges that pop up in our lives, and the strength of who we are and the strength of our character is shown when we look at them as challenges, and we look at what we can do to overcome those challenges. I think it's a very empowering process to do that.
It is.
Now, are you happy to move on to question number 2?
Definitely. So the next one, provide an example of current or previous performance management, and use the example to highlight how you best measure your own performance and the tools that you use to assist you. So this can be something, as it says, from a previous position or a previous performance management that you might have had. That, if for those of you that have been through a few performance management appraisals and meetings and things over the years, there'll normally be 1 or 2 that'll stick in your mind for one reason or another. If they're all exactly the same, they're not really doing their job. A good performance management process will give you positives, maybe some negatives, but you'll come out with some ideas and tools to assist you to keep professionally growing within that organisation and within yourself. So, hopefully everybody's got a good example here that you can use. What did you do to actually measure your performance, and then what tools came out of it that helped you to continue to grow professionally within the organisation? So there's going to be a lot of different examples on this one, I think,
Yeah,
which will be great.
Yeah, these are the questions we love because we get to see the students, not so much the theoretical concepts of these units, but just really just you kind of connecting to the questions and connecting to the elements, which is really nice, I think.
So it's not just flick back through those pages and go, oh, yep, there's the paragraph that has the answer, I'll just transfer that information in. This is about what you've got in your mind about this particular topic and how you've experienced it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, question 3 basically says, if you wanted a promotion, what competitive edge would specifically make you stand out from others at work and why?
This can be an uncomfortable sort of question for some people. And I would ask, if somebody really struggles to come up with something productive on this one, get some feedback. Ask somebody else what they think about you.
That's a great idea. That is a great idea. It's hard also to, if we wanted a competitive edge and if we wanted a promotion and, what competitive edge would make me stand out from others at work, you're right. A great opportunity would be for you to ask somebody you work with, what makes me stand out from others? I think it can be a very, very empowering question, this one.
It's about selling yourself, isn't it? And some people are just not comfortable doing that. So this is one of those, steps in this whole process that's going to give you that little bit of self-reflection on what is really good about you, and then hopefully give you a bit of confidence coming out of it. So next week you'll be able to go off and network all over the place because you're so confident.
That's exactly right. That's what we hope to achieve. And then obviously question 4 then follows on, because it says list some of the strategies you could use to remain competitive. So in question 3 we've said, okay, so what gives you the competitive edge? And if you wanted a promotion at work, and why do these things give you a competitive edge? And then that question 4 is actually kind of stemming on and saying, well, how do you stay competitive? What strategies do you use to make sure that you are competitive? So again, this could be a very personalized people might have different strategies that help them remain competitive. I mean, attending networking functions or, doing a lot of research or kind of, reaching out to other people in their industry could be some of the ways that people remain competitive, depending on your organisation as well. I mean, there might be other organisations out there that to remain competitive, it might be, updating qualifications or lots of training, etc.
It could even, yes, come back to some of those personal sort of things that you're doing within yourself. Maybe you've taken yourself off to start learning another language or something like that in your own time that might actually help you to be competitive in the workforce. So it might be a mixture of things you do at work, but also things that you've chosen to do personally for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So what are some of the benefits then of networking for you in the business? So we've talked about, sort of learning to network yourself as a person and networking for the company that you work for. So once you're comfortable in doing that, what benefits do you think it's going to bring? So, both for yourself and for the organisation. So is it going to be a situation where you're going to be looking for more customers for the organisation that you work for? Are you wanting to, improve your self-confidence and get to know more about your competitors? So what sort of things are you actually going to be able to benefit by getting that confidence up and starting to network more and more?
Beautiful. Great. Sorry about that. I had a coughing attack. Right.
All good now?
Right, level of networking. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. So that's question 5 and question 6 that you've covered there. Now, question 7, I just have noticed that it's actually a repeat of question 3.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So you guys out there, you don't.
Question 7, C as above.
Yeah, exactly right, as above. So essentially, there are only 6 questions that you really need to get done with regards to this learning activity. Now, Alison, is there anything else you want to add in regards to the learning activity, or?
I think the learning activities will be really quite good. Some of these are fairly a little bit longer than some of the previous ones that we've gone through, but they've got some fantastic information. So again, everybody will do it at their own pace, whether you sort of, skim through and look for the particular areas that, with lots of attachments and things like that that you need to go through. But everything that you need is there. But again, this section, both of these sections will again come from a bit of reflection on you and your own situation. So we'll get a good mixture of responses here, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you again need any clarification on anything, you can just hit email my teacher, I think it is. So Alison and myself and Adam are always around, obviously, to assist you guys. But I'll upload this webinar in the next couple of days. So if you guys want to have a bit of a review of it at any time, you'll be able to. Obviously, now that's 3 webinars that Alison and I have done. So that should take you through all the learning activities for professional development. And the next webinar will probably focus on looking at some of those assessment tasks as a component of professional development. But with the assessment tasks, it's always good to know that they tend to be based on a lot of the learning activities. So my suggestion is always make sure you get those learning activities done and dusted. And the assessment tasks are really expanding on the concepts that have been addressed in the learning activities. So they go really nicely together hand in hand.
Absolutely. It's it brings through those final assessments, just really show everything that you've learnt throughout all of those activities along the way, and it brings it all together so that you can actually show your competence for this particular unit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, if there are no questions from our wonderful students out there, I guess we'll probably finish up then for this afternoon. As we mentioned before, if you need anything, Alison and myself are always available. So just shoot us an email and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But in the meantime, we'll look forward to receiving some of your learning activities for 360-degree feedback and professional development.
Fantastic. Good luck with all the online activities. Enjoy.
See you later, everybody. Bye-bye.